And we are live on the first episode of Lord of the Collections. This is a new channel that myself and Valchrist have started, and we are hoping to be able to kind of offer a unique Canadian perspective on the hobby of collecting Lord of the Rings and all things Middle Earth. We are, you guys probably both know us from the Flame of Udun forum, as well as Valchrist is also on the United Cutlery, or not, Ultimate Collectors forum. I always call it the United Cutlery forum. So that's the purpose of this channel. You know, we're here to just have some fun, talk about collectibles, what's new, and hopefully interview many collectors out there and kind of get a broad kind of sense of the different collectors out there and kind of showcase their collections, you know. So Val, you've been collecting for quite a while. You are a long beard compared to me in the collecting world. So what kind of got you into collecting? What was there, like did you see a piece in the mall or a brochure and you're just, I had to have that? How did you get started?
I was actually in a mall. I think it was between, in the time between the release of the Two Towers and Return of the King. I was at a big mall here in my hometown of Vancouver, and there was just a not a collectible store per se, but more like a knives and cutlery sort of store, and they actually had a lot of United Cutlery products on display. A lot of those display swords by Kit Ray and Gil Hibben, those guys. And I noticed, it caught my eye, and I noticed right away on the display window they had Sting.
Oh yeah.
So I did a double take. I had no idea this sword had been made. You know, the internet being sort of in its infancy. You got to remember, this was 2001 or 2002. Forget exactly what the years the movies came out. I think is 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
So it took me completely by surprise. I knew the moment I laid eyes on that I had to have it. I'd never collected swords before, but who among us when we're kids we don't play with sticks and play at sword fighting and always have that fantasy of one day owning a blade or something like that. And
definitely, I remember cutting up broken hockey sticks, and that's probably gonna make our international friends laugh. But cutting up broken hockey sticks to make toy swords and having a battle in the backyard. It's funny, I remember in West Edmonton Mall there was a similar store, and I remember seeing racks of United Cutlery blades, and there was the Urukai scimitar, and there was a big sign that says, "Do not touch the oils on your fingerprints will cause it to rust." And I didn't really, I thought it was cool, but this will make you feel old, but I would have been like, I don't know, 9 years old at the time. All right. And so I don't remember what those retailed for. Maybe, I don't know, $200 at most back then. And but $200 when you're 9 years old might as well be like $200,000.
Oh yeah.
And so
that's for sure.
The hockey sticks are a bit more accessible. So that's cool. My first piece, well, I kind of have two, if that makes. My first piece was the Noble Collection map and key of Thorn. I bought that at a high school when the first Hobbit movie came out, but it didn't really follow that up with anything. I just bought it. It was The Hobbit was the first novel I had read, and so it was a special book for me. And then that kind of stuff was started coming out. I bought that, but I didn't follow it up. And then 2 years ago, March of 2020, was kind of when COVID first started to happen in North America. I remember just watching the trilogy and just thinking like, what am I waiting for? Like I've always wanted this stuff. I think I just was looking online at Haragram and just thinking like, why haven't I got this stuff? I've always wanted it. Now seems like a good time. Everybody reacted to COVID a little differently. And mine was I started collecting Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
So and
I
then
think a lot of people
I bought the bust of Isildur from Sideshow Weta.
Yeah.
I think I paid like $30 for it, and I thought, dang, that's expensive. But he's a cool character, and I've always loved the armor from the prologue, especially Isildur and Elendil. So that was my first piece. Now, since you've been collecting, you were there 3,000 years ago, so you have a few Grail pieces, I imagine, and pieces you've missed out on and regret not getting. Curious to hear what those would be.
like the ones I have and the ones that I regret not getting.
Yeah, like what is your
Um,
Grail piece that you have been unable to acquire in your collecting time, and what's maybe your white whale, one that just got away but still haunts you?
Oh gosh. That's a tough one because I've, over the past 20 years, I very determinedly and doggedly have hunted down almost every single piece that I wanted, be it United Cutlery, Sideshow and Weta, or Noble Collection, or even the custom, many of the wonderful custom made props that are out there. I've managed to get a hold of those. That's tough. I honestly can't think of one thing at the moment, but I mean, there was a couple of very rare rings made by Noble Collection that they must have been very small runs. I don't believe they were ever limited edition items. I don't think they were ever numbered. I think there was just a very few small amount of them that were made. One of them being the Ring of Denethor, which you can glimpse him wearing the ring in a few of the scenes, the infamous cherry tomato scene.
Yeah, the tomato massacre, and I think kiss that ring too. I think
the tomato massacre of Minas Tirith. That's one. There was I think there was a circlet worn by Eowyn and a brooch that belonged to Theoden. So because Noble Collection at the time, they were just releasing a whole bunch of the jewelry. I obviously got all the important rings, but just those little lesser known pieces that I didn't quite pay attention to, and I kind of regret it now because even the stuff that belongs to the second or third tier characters, I think because a lot of people dismissed it, and the companies also didn't make a whole lot of them, probably for that reason. They suddenly became unicorns, and they're really, really, really difficult to find. And whenever they do show up on the internet, it's for an absurd amount of money. So
yes, I have seen that Denethor ring by Noble on eBay, and it's like you guys are asking like $1,000, 1,500 American for it, and that's such a high price for such. It's not even a ring of power, it's an obscure ring from a very quite disliked character, right? And so
I mean, there's zero meaning to the lore that I know. It's not a ring that's even in the books. It was just a prop created for the character to wear. But it's weird how some things acquire this kind of fame, but or infamy in a sense.
Like those are the conditions that make a rare collectible. They're not well received upon release, so they don't make a ton of them, and then years later guys want them to complete their set, and then it becomes really sought after, and it kind of takes on like a mythical status within that. community, kind of like a Sealer Sword by United Cutlery, how it wasn't well received. It gets like 2 seconds of screen time, and it didn't sell well at first. So there aren't a lot out there. And then guys started hunting them down to complete their cutlery collection, and then now they're incredibly sought after.
Yep. Yep.
It's funny how that works.
What's yours?
Oh, well, as you know, I haven't been collecting too long, about 2 years, and probably Minas Tirith, the Weta Minas Tirith environment is probably up there for my grail. So much so that I have been lobbying heavily to get it remade, and that's when I'm looking forward to one day opening up and adding to my collection. I love anything Gondor related and Gondorian culture, and Minas Tirith just has such a beautiful city. I still remember that first time when we see it as Gandalf kind of crests that hill in the Return. It's just so awe-inspiring, and that is the definitive collectible of Minas Tirith, I kind of think. The Danbury Mint one is good, and there's some aspects to it that the Weta one doesn't have, but it also kind of has a bit more of the Pelennor Fields and the Rocky Mount, the mountains in the back, which for me makes it the definitive version. And it long sold out by the time I started collecting, and it was already expensive when I started collecting, and I've seen only a handful of them pop up for sale, only one in Canada, since starting collecting. My big regret is Spec Fiction used to have Minas Morgul for sale, and it was like basically retail price from Weta, and I just kept putting it off. But I'm like, wow, there's other ones on eBay that are long sold out. I should, that's what I was focusing on other rare pieces that I couldn't buy. And then one day I went and checked, and it was gone. And there was like 8 of them. I thought I had time, right? and then all of a sudden they were gone. I was like, oh, what the hell?
That's the thing I've learned in with this hobby, and being at it a lot longer than you have, is to not obviously we have to give it some thought. These things are, they were never cheap, and the prices have only been increasing. I've been watching that for a while now, and it's just getting scary how much stuff costs, especially shipping. But I've also found that if your first gut instinct is to get that piece, then to not hesitate, because I've been a fallen victim to that myself. There's that indecision, or I can come back to that later, I'm going to get something else right now, or you just don't give it the thought and the urgency that you should in the moment, and before you know it, someone else will scoop it, or suddenly it's sold out, or even the open edition statues from Weta and Minas Tirith being an example, they can be gone just like that. And in fact, that's one of the things I'm all for open editions, but I wish the company would at least give the collectors a heads up that they're about to end production of that particular piece, because it would be helpful, for us that are sitting on a fence, or maybe putting it off, to get our affairs in order, and basically order it up. Because I think currently you will get a low stock warning appear on the website, but what does that mean? Does that mean there's 10 left? There's 100 left? It's hard to say. So I think it'd be really helpful if they took the time to just put in the newsletter, an alert to say, we are ending production of this statue. We are selling the remaining stock that we have in our warehouse. No more will be made. We have these many units left. Hurry now, get yours before it's gone, type of thing. Right. And that's all it would take. And I think that would be so appreciated by the collecting community. because that's what happened with me in Minas Tirith. I have the Denbury Mint one. I'm quite happy with it. Kind of hummed and hawed on the Weta version for a while because it was, I think it was about $600 US at the time. And one day it was gone and there was almost no warning. I think they did put up the low stock, but it's like, again, what does that mean? What does low stock mean and how quickly is that going to disappear? So just something I think they could improve, and maybe people wouldn't be in for a nasty surprise like you were when stuff is suddenly not there the next day.
Weta has kind of done that recently with their end of the line sale. Like there's a few Hobbit holes that are on there, that kind of gives us, a warning that these things they're going to be gone, and so you better get yours. So, I mean, it's not the best, there's information telling us it's going to be gone, but like you said, we don't know how many they have lying around. It could be 100, it could be 200, it could be 50. Who knows? Only what I understand. Maybe they don't even know. So that's an interesting topic, actually. We'll probably have a bit of time to talk about that. The aspect of re-releasing open editions, and we've kind of talked about that on the forum, and the slippery slope that creates. And I know we're a little bit opposed on our kind of thinking on that, but I did think it might be a fun topic to kind of touch on briefly. I'm it's no secret to those on the forum and anybody who recognizes me on Facebook, not that they should, but I think I'm maybe at this point known as the guy that lobbies for Minas Tirith on the Facebook group. And and I think because it's an open edition, it's fair game. There's no set edition on it. I don't feel like I don't think it's there's no contract between the manufacturer and the consumer saying we're only going to make so many of this, not like a limited edition. To me, they feel like fair game. But some people have definitely talked about, well, if Weta does that, is it going to create the slippery slope of, because you see some people suggest, well, what about redoing this limited edition one, which for many obvious reasons is a bad idea. And I'm definitely not interested in that either. And I know
I think
adamantly opposed.
I think our opinions are actually the same. I think the discussion we were having was around someone was requesting, suggesting, it was actually, but the wording was a little strange. So I interpreted the member as asking for a re-release of a limited edition statue, which is now sold out. What it turns out he was suggesting is that the same character in the same scene, but in a different pose, that could be added to the scene. Which I then, in that case, because I'm very much dead set against bringing back limited editions in any form.
Yes, I think that's killer.
With an open edition, I think that's fair game. That's fair game. That's the reason it's open. I mean, they cannot. I think what some folks don't understand is that, if it's open edition, it should be around forever. Well, it doesn't work that way, because you got to keep the molds do degrade over time. They got to keep all the tooling and the production ready to go and set up, and the paint apps, everything at the factory basically has to be ready to roll at a moment's notice to make more of those. And it does cost time and money, and they do have to make room for whatever is next down the line. They don't just have all of these statues ad infinitum back to the beginning of the company ready to go at any moment. So because it costs money to keep that production availability there, and at some point they have to retire that piece and move on to something else. So that they're even considering to bring back Minas Tirith, which is quite an intricate and detailed model, is pretty huge of them. And I think that would be a big hit with a lot of people that either missed out the first time or have come into the game later, like yourself. And So yeah, I'm all for it. If they see that they can make a profit, I think they should absolutely go for it. I think it's going to cost a lot more than it did originally, but that's fair, inflation and whatnot.
Uh-huh.
But as far as the limited editions goes, no, that's a red line. I'm sorry.
Uh-huh.
I've missed out myself on some pieces. I feel for those that don't get something, especially like Aragorn and Amon Hen, that was a very low edition size and it was gone very quickly.
It was gone before it even went up for sale, really.
Yeah, and that's before they were using the time pre-order model, which I think is very helpful in preventing that from happening now.
Yeah.
This is back when they were doing set edition numbers. So if you were asleep at the wheel and with such a low edition number, it's very easy to lose it. But I completely disagree that just because that happened to you, that the company should reconsider and bring the piece back. That was their decision to make, and I think they need to honor that contract.
I agree.
With the collectors, and that's it. You want to bring back that character? Look out! I mean, it's a single Aragorn in a particular pose that goes with one specific scene. We have so many Aragorns out there already from not just Weta but other companies.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can find a stand-in to put it, or it's only a matter of time before Weta releases another statue of that same character that can be used in a variety of the ways. So
yeah.
And
kind of expanding on the alternative poses for that character in that same scene situation, I do kind of think that maybe is inevitable. Once companies kind of exhaust, there's only so many ways you can do a character, right? And that is kind of their loophole workaround on, like, well, we know Aragorn at Amon Hen is a really sought after piece. We can't bring it back due to that would be just collectible suicide, but we can kind of work around that by offering him in a different pose. Now, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, but I wouldn't be surprised if it did happen 10, 15 years down the road, because that seems to be like their only a loophole for manufacturers to kind of exploit. And then the other option is you do what United Cutlery does and just never do another limited edition again.
See, those are the guys that have gone back on that promise. That's something I will never forgive them for, because I think that's, you're cheating your customers. I'll be blunt. You're lying to them. And I do understand that the company went through a bankruptcy, and it's essentially has different ownership now, and I suppose they could make the claim that they don't feel obligated to honor what the previous incarnation of the company did. But I'm sorry, but to me that's a technicality, and they shouldn't be exploiting that. Like one, and they even do it with their own products. Like the Mace of Sauron is one example. They released the mace a few years ago as a limited edition piece. It was quite popular. I mean, a lot of collectors, myself included, had been waiting for that particular replica for a long time. They probably underestimated how popular it would be. I don't recall the edition size at the moment. Mine's boxed up, so I can't look it up. But I think it actually went quite fast, and maybe they were surprised by it. And so that's their own mistake, because then they try to figure out a way that, well, they start to see what the prices are like on the aftermarket, and they feel like they're missing out. No, we could have sold so many more units, but we made it limited edition. What do we do? Well, they have the bright idea of, like, what's that thing called? It's called the Red Eye edition or something like that.
Yeah, like the Red Eye banner edition.
So they printed a cheap Red Eye banner of Sauron to hang behind it. The mace itself and the display are exactly the same as before. There's absolutely no difference in the product to distinguish it from the original run. They simply created a banner that you hang behind it, probably repackaged it, slapped, red banner edition on it. And away they go with making a couple more thousand of these things and reaping in the profits. And to me, that just, it cheapens the collectability and the rarity of the original. And it breaks a promise to your customers. To me, it's not about being selfish and feeling like, you know, I have this rare piece and I want no one else to have it. But if that is how you're going to market it and how you're going to sell it in the first place as something that is a limited piece, then it shouldn't be remade. So that's where I stand on that.
Yeah, and that's fair, because you're buying that product with that assumption, you know, that understanding, you know,
Precisely.
And, you know, and so and you're paying a bit more because you think, well, this is my chance. I'm not going to get another chance to buy this, right? Once they're sold out, they're sold out, and then all of a sudden they come back.
There's that additional pressure. You don't want to wait on it because it's limited, so it'll be gone before long. So yeah, it's unfair, but
yeah,
they do it, and I hope, to my knowledge, Weta's never done that, and I hope they never will. So to go back to the statues and the different poses and whatnot, all I would ask for them, it'll probably be quite a few years before they revisit that same character in that same setting, wearing the same clothes. You know, the environment on the base is going to be identical because they're in the same place. I would ask only that the pose itself be different enough.
Yeah,
there would be like a visible difference between the two, so you can, you know, at a glance tell that this is Aragorn at Amunhen, the original, and here is the newer version, and they're in a much different pose. So it's not hard to do. I mean,
it should be drastically different. Like there should be, you know,
at least
don't 50% just take away
maybe,
like Aragorn's dagger.
Yeah,
you know, like it should be different enough that it is unmistakably a different piece, you know. And that's not maybe necessarily, but you know, I was never been too bummed to miss out on that one because I'm just not a big fan of the pose. You know, it's a great statue, but it's a bit too dynamic for my taste.
Yeah, it was very divisive at the time it came out.
Yeah,
some people say, oh, it's tripping Aragorn, but I liked it. I think it was the first time that they actually really nailed the likeness of Viggo Mortensen. I mean, I have the original Strider from the Sideshow days, and I have the Aragorn at the Black Gates, and I have the King Elisar. So prior to buying Aragorn at Amunhen, I already had 3 statues of him. So it says a lot, and a lot of people aren't in a repetition, or it just gets really expensive to have multiples of the same character.
Yeah.
But the 3 versions that I had are all very different in the point in time in the movie that they represent.
Yeah.
So, and for me, it wasn't about completing the scene because I never bought Boromir. I didn't like the pose. I didn't like the fact that he was, you know, stuck full of arrows. I totally get the moment in the movie and the dramatic effect they were going for, but I decided to pass on it. I did buy Lurtz because I wanted a good representation of the character, and I think they hit it out of the ballpark with Lurtz at Amunhen. But when I saw Aragorn, I'm like, that just looks so incredibly good, and I'm big on likeness.
Yeah.
Some people don't care as much for that. I am big. If you're trying to capture that actor, then do it justice. And I thought it was really great. So I waited. I was there on the pre-order went live, and I snagged one, and the rest is history.
Well, that's great. Yeah. So let's move on here. And let's talk about some of the newer stuff. What has come out with Sauron and the Argonath, and you know, you have the old Sauron, and so what convinced you to buy the new one? For me, it was an easy choice. I didn't have the old one, and I loved the new one when it came out. I remember sitting on my laptop, like watching the Weta Collectibles Unleashed live, and as soon as it was revealed, you know, there has been bits and rumors, you know, that it was going to be Sauron's year, and so I was pretty excited for it, and I thought they nailed it. I think it's I love the pose, you know, it's that, and I had hoped actually for that pose of, you know, he's kind of holding that his mace like a schoolyard bully, you know, ready to
It's like he's almost tapping it, like,
yeah, like
oh, who wants some of this? Yeah,
he's ready to fight, like, and that was the
yeah,
scene I was hoping Weta wouldn't do something too dynamic,
right.
but it's dynamic enough with his cape, and you do get a little sense of motion in him, but it's not over the
Not
top.
so much.
It's not like that sideshow diorama, which is quite dynamic with the Numenorians flying everywhere.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
but the big selling for me was the paint, and the different shades and coloring on it. Like, I've always thought it was really cool that Weta added that, because there's a cool scientific background to that too. I kind of mentioned this before on the forum, but like when metal heats up, it goes through a different temperature change, like color wise, like there's a different scale. And so
Yeah.
it'll go from like a straw color to a gold brassy, to shades of blue to dark purple,
Mhm.
and as it heats up. And to see that on Sauron's armor was a really cool, like, it's not necessarily a touch that your average person is going to notice, right? But I
Yeah.
mean, we know that there is a ton of heat coming off of Sauron, right? That's why the inscription on the ring is, and how he's able to burn Gilgalad alive. And so
Mhm.
that the fact that they added that was a really cool touch, and one of the selling features for me, and I think a lot of other collectors.
Yeah, well, for me, it wasn't an immediate thing, that's for sure. I love my sideshow Weta version. It's been like one of the show-stopping pieces of my collection for a long time. Not just in the size; it's pretty majestic. It's got, you know, um, I hate to use this word, but I'll use it here. It's an iconic pose from the prologue of the movie when he holds the ring up after
Right.
he's forged it.
Uh-huh.
Um, so yeah, it was not a simple or a quick decision that I would um, either get a second version of that character or replace them altogether. So yeah, it was a pretty big debate that raged internally for me for a few days. The more I looked at the pictures of the prototype, the more I fell in love with it. Um, and I thought, if there's a criticism I have about the old statue is that the paint job just never blew me away. I mean, let's face it, Sauron it's a pretty monochromatic character. Um, there's black, there's gray, and there's hints of shiny metal here and there.
Uh-huh.
So like those scales, that spectrum of heat affecting metal, it's just not present on the original statue. There's definitely that charred look, which I think is also appropriate and should be there,
Uh-huh.
but that's really all there is to it. So there's not a lot of variety or anything that really pops about how the statue is painted. Actually, the Morgul Lord from Sideshow Weta, I think, suffers from the same issue. It's just
Yeah.
black with a little splash of silver and steel here and there. But anyways, so the more I looked at the new one and began to see the just the nuances in the paint and how much more it was, it almost had that, like it's catching, like when you watch the prologue and there's a sort of like, it's overcast in Mordor, of course, but there's sort of a bit of a silvery light in the sky, almost as if the sun's trying to come through, but it can't.
Uh-huh.
And it's almost like that armor is just catching glimpses of that. It was just so incredible. But to be perfectly honest with you, what tipped me over the edge to buy it is when it was announced that he was going to be part of a scene that would include two other characters that I have been weighing many years to see what a realize in statue form. No other company has brought them to life. They had two busts done a long time ago, which I did buy, and they were the only representations of just those two characters that I have. that anyone had, and that's Elendil and Gil-galad. So when it was announced on the forum by Daniel Falconer that they were going to have an Elendil and eventually a Gil-galad that would be paired off to face off against Sauron, that clinched it for me, because I don't think the original statue is suitable to recreate that scene.
Yeah,
Sure, you can do a little bit of theater of the mind and kind of,
you can kind of make it work, but not
yeah,
nearly.
you can make it work, but it's not optimal.
Yeah.
And they were very clever in doing this. I think they knew that for a long time a lot of us were wanting those two characters to finally have their day. So I think that helped make the decision for a lot of people, myself included, that there were going to be these two other characters to pose along with it. And from that moment on, it was pre-order. I did tell myself then, well, this is really expensive, and I would like to get some of that money back, so I should sell my original statue. I have yet to come to grips with that decision and make it final. I'm trying to figure out a way how maybe I should just keep both. So he's still very much is a part of my collection, and who knows, there may be twin Saurons in my collection, maybe not, but
you gotta
the new one has definitely taken the crown for now.
You gotta have the new one with Elendil and Gil-galad, but then you kind of have to have Sauron on his own, to pair with Barad-dûr and some of the other bad guys, so
yeah,
that's a good way to rationalize it. But I don't think we can talk about Sauron without mentioning the latest, one of the latest controversies with Weta, with Pauldron Gate is what it's been called. I don't really, it doesn't really bother me, had it not been pointed out, I wouldn't have even noticed it. It's it doesn't ruin the statue for me. I still enjoy it as much as I did before. I've flipped them around and displayed them the correct way, and it doesn't quite look as good. It looks fine from certain angles because you don't notice the odd gap, that is created because the keys don't line up. But for the most part, it doesn't bug me, and I have a hard time seeing Weta do anything to address the issue. I'm not sure if what your thoughts on it, if they're similar.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very subtle difference, and like you said, if it hadn't been pointed out and various screen caps been posted to actually illustrate the difference between the back and the front and how it appears in the movie and how it's been subsequently been portrayed in error in statue form ever since. I never would have noticed. I would have gone, on blissfully unaware and displaying the statue as is. Again, because I am in the process of moving and my collection is currently boxed up. After I received them, I pulled them out, I put them together, made sure that the cape fit properly, because that's been the biggest issue that people have had with the bit of a tight fitting on the cape. So I just want to make sure that it was here we go.
Yeah,
it was fitting properly, and then I put them back. So I don't really have the opportunity to flip those around and just see how it looks. I mean, I've seen the screen caps and whatnot. So yeah, it's a very, very subtle change. I think I'm with you. It doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't change how I feel about the statue. I don't think I'm going to flip them around and have them sit awkwardly with that gap. But unfortunately, it would always be in the back of my mind now that when I look at it, I know that there is something incorrect about it. So you get that little bugbear that stays with you. I'm one of those kind of people. Yeah, if there's a little flaw anywhere in my collection on any piece, unfortunately,
I look at
always think about it when I look at that statue. I don't just ignore it.
Yeah.
So Yeah, I think um, it's a bit unfortunate that when they were doing the
The referencing.
drawing up the modeling for the statue to taking their reference photos from the replica of well, not the replica, the actual prop that was
The actual
used
prop
in the
armor.
film that is at I believe it's on display. Is it the Weta Cave or is it in their office?
The Weta Cave. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's somewhere there that the employees have access to, and that's what they took the references from. But unfortunately, it appears that all those years ago, the statue was assembled. Not a statue, the armor on the mannequin was assembled incorrectly. The pauldrons were put on backwards. Nobody noticed, and that's how the statue got made, because the reference was incorrect. So it's unfortunate for a company that essentially created those replicas
Created that
for the
armor.
movie. Yeah, that they didn't have didn't do their due diligence and make sure that everything was absolutely correct and check all the references they had to make sure that something like that couldn't happen. But it did, and here we are. And unfortunately, I think it would be quite costly for them to try and
it would be costly,
the word,
on some ways it's no different than a car manufacturing offering a recall on defective, I don't know, airbags or something on, like it's not really any different. I mean, the statue still functions fine, it's not a safety thing like a recall, but
I know, absolutely, yeah.
But
they would essentially require them to design the pauldrons facing the correct way and
ship them to everyone that
box them up and then ship them to every single collector that bought the piece. I think for a limited edition item that was priced quite high, it's the least that they could do. But I could also see how costly that would be on their end. It might not, and they might not see it as worth it. It'd be nice if they could acknowledge it, at least offer an apology. But it is what it is, and it happened. And but I don't think it doesn't lessen my enjoyment of the statue appreciably in any way, to be honest.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm more just, I guess, surprised, curious how they didn't notice, like when they looked at the reference from the film, how they didn't notice it. That's to me more surprising, that an artist who the guy that sculpted it, he's going to sculpt what he is given as reference, right? And so it's more surprising that whoever gave him the reference didn't give him the everything he needed to succeed. And we kind of saw that with the Lendel, with the Anduriel scabbard, and what was the other issue that he had? Was that it? Just the Anduriel scabbard, I think.
Oh, well, yeah, there was a minor kerfuffle with the angle of the blade,
right,
slightly off from the hilt, but that it just turns out that it wasn't properly seated on the desk when the photo was taken. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to judge because we don't know exactly what goes into this process when they are giving the reference material to the artists to work off of. We don't know if the person just walks into where the prop is and they take photos and then go home and do their work, or if somebody else does that for them. Because it really, depending on the person that's gathering those materials, like how deep are they going into looking for reference? I mean, having the statue, here I go with statue again, having the mannequin with the armor just sitting there, the prop itself, anyone would think that this is enough. Like, we can look at this thing from every angle, we can take 100 photos. They probably don't feel a need to go through every frame of the movie to look for anything additional, because what would you find? But the reverse of that is that, yeah, you would spot the mistake, because in the movie you'd see that the pauldrons are actually being worn a different way. So Yeah, it's not like we have a clear target here that we can pin the blame on, because we don't have a perfect understanding of the process of how they get all
Yeah,
the reference material for their artists. But somewhere along the way, someone dropped the ball, and it's just a mistake that's been perpetuated now for years. And unfortunately, we have a statue that's not 100% correct. I think Daniel actually explained what happened with the scabbard is that they took the references that they used for Ellendale. They used photos, obviously from 20 years ago when the actor was on set, and for some reason, when he was posing for the photos, I'm not sure why and how these things happen, but I guess the Anduril scabbard, which
uh-huh.
obviously had already been created as a prop, was nearby, and that's what they gave to the actor to wear on that particular day.
Okay.
So when that photo was given to the artist, he basically copied what he saw, but that it should have been the Narsil
Yeah,
scabbard, the one without the
yeah.
plate with the runes on it. So that was just one of those little weird
Uh-huh.
mistakes that was made again many years ago, just for photos that, you know,
Yeah, and well, and you
they
think
didn't
about
know what
how
they were
like,
going to use them for all that time later. So
how some film, some crew member, was told to just go grab, and they might not have been the super fans that would notice that kind of stuff, and they're like,
the
well, they look
nitpickers,
the same. you know
yeah,
so they grab the one, and I mean, they do look the same. It's just the absence of that plate with the runes on it. That's And so, I can understand how a crew member might mix that up, right? Especially
for
like that
sure, yeah.
one. So
But when they're, when they're making a statue like that all those years later, they really should be going over those photos,
uh-huh.
and the statue itself with a
Yeah,
fine tooth comb before they give this the final sign off on it. And I'm just surprised that no one noticed that, hang on a second, that is not the correct scabbard. It took essentially some eagle-eyed fans on the forum to spot that, and thankfully get a hold of them and notify them of the issue
yeah.
before the
And that
statue actually got made, because by then it would be too late for sure. So
yeah. And that was similar to the Gandalf mini, the new Gandalf mini, who had the wrong staff,
yeah, that was another one.
and like I think having the props, access to the props, is a huge benefit for Weta, and it really really helps with the details, I think. But
Mhm.
also, that's you need to combine that with what we the fans see in the film, because as a collector, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, I want my collectibles to look like what I see on screen, right? Because that's
Mhm.
what I have access to. So maybe the prop has changed, or it's been displayed differently in Weta's hands, but that's not what the collector, see. That's not what I've seen 200 times as I've watched those movies, right? And so I think that does need to be taken into account, and I'm sure for the most part it is, right? And so, but perhaps some better scrutinizing could go into that
Oh,
leading
yeah, I
forward,
mean, just
hopefully.
just as in the film and movie industry, there's usually someone on set that's in charge of continuity,
Yeah,
because I mean, a lot of what we see
it's
in
not
these
filmed in
shows and
order.
movies, it's not filmed in sequence. It's filled over great periods of time. There's many different takes for any given scene. The
Mhm.
actors take breaks, stuff gets put away, stuff comes back.
Yeah,
So there's someone in charge of examining that very last frame of where they stopped and how things looked and what the actor was wearing and all those little
yeah,
particulars, which way the hair was combed, all of that stuff. And in this case, which one of several props of the same thing was being used, because sometimes there are some small variations or earlier versions of whatnot that might be kicking around.
uh-huh.
And that person makes sure that everything for the next take or the next scene or what have you matches perfectly, so that the viewer will
Yeah,
never notice that there was actually a time gap between those bits being shot. So I think it would be important for someone to be in charge of that as well during this process, to make sure that the artists aren't getting, concept art or a photo of, Ian McKellen on set with a staff that was not actually in the final cut of the movie. That
Right.
at some point, the director, Peter Jackson, or second unit director, or whoever, decided, no, we're going to switch props, we're going to use this one instead. And but still the artist ended up with an earlier photo reference. They're not watching the movie, they're just looking at a photo. And that's how, I think, at least,
Yeah, I mean, we're
which are
speculating.
sure, but that's how these mistakes, that's how I speculate these kind of mistakes get made. Because if they were sitting there and watching the movie frame by frame and just kind of freezing it and taking their notes and drawing and sculpting and whatnot, then these little errors wouldn't happen, I don't think.
So other than Sauron, we both happened to pre-order the Argonath, which has both arrived for both of us. And what are your thoughts on that? Like, I really like it. And we'll get into my issues with it later, but I think, like, for like what the Argonath is, it's one of the 7 wonders of Middle-earth. Like, it could be one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world if it was like real, right?
Yeah.
It's just such an impressive. And the old one, which I own, and I paid a decent amount for it merely months before the new one was released. But
we should point out that, by the way, you are shooting on location at the Argonath.
This is true.
So
Yes,
that's how important it is. Coming live to you from the Anduin.
Yeah, Raros. Now, I like the old one. I like the fact that it's sculpted by Mary McLaughlin, I think is her name, and she worked on the actual miniature that was, used in the, or bigature, I should call it, used in the film. I like the aspect, but it does lack the presence that the new one does. I like on the new one, they've kind of stripped away the rock, and you get, the each character's got to be a foot, like each has to be about a foot tall, right? And it really has the presence that the Argonath should have in your collection. Like, it's not being overshadowed by the 1/6 figures in your collection, in your display cabinet. It's a big boy, and it's front and center, and it demands your attention, the new one, which I really like. And the addition to the little trees really gives you a good sense of scale and just how big it is, where you don't really get that with the old one. Like, there's 3 grains of rice where the fellowship boats are on the old one. And I mean, now they're bigger grains of rice on the new one, but you kind of have some
with a bit of color, at least.
And so that's I really liked it. I know a lot of people. The original had a small edition size of only 500, and so there's a lot of collectors out there that for years and years and years they've only had the bookends as to represent the Argonath in their collection. And so the fact that Weta came back and redid one of the most iconic locations in Middle-earth in such a huge way, I think is really exciting.
Yeah. So I'm one of those that didn't have the original. I've had the bookends. Have been the only representation of that environment that I've ever had. And they're great, but of course they're small and they're not attached. And it's just you just feel differently about them because they're the collectible that came with the DVDs. It's, you don't take them quite as seriously as the main statues that Weta does put out. So yeah, when we were talking about grails earlier, I mean, as far as Weta is concerned, that's probably one that I tried for a while to find it. I think when I started collecting the Weta statues, I think they were in the moment of transition between ending their partnership with Sideshow and going on their own. And I completely missed that release. By the time I'd found out it had sold out. And I always regretted not trying harder at the time to find it, because it probably would have still been a reasonable price. But many years when I did sort of fixate on trying to get it, it was already well past the point where I was comfortable paying for it, specifically because it was a small piece. I don't think it was, despite the small edition size. And if we want to talk small edition size versus the absurd price, we can talk about the Prancing Pony, which came around the same time. But yeah, I just didn't feel it was enough there to justify the price that people were asking for on the secondary market. So I never got it. So when this one was finally announced, to me, it was a no-brainer. I knew immediately that I had to get it. And you're absolutely right about the presence and the size. There's just certain environments that need a certain amount of scale to really convey the majesty that you get, that sense of awe that you have in the movies. Like people complain about, oh, the Prancing Pony is tiny, but sure, and it is small. I have one. I'm lucky enough to have one, but it's also it's a small building in the movie. It's an inn. It's it's not something that you look at and you're just like, oh my God, this is just amazing. So relative to what it represents, I think the sign is fine. Could it be a little bigger? Sure, but not much really. But the Argonath, I think, really needed a boost, and this is what it is. So, and this actually ties in with the earlier conversation we just had about whether companies should do re-release a limited edition. Well, the Argonath is a limited edition.
And they circumvented that.
Is Weta breaking their contract with their customers by releasing this new one? It is the same environment, but to me, I don't believe so. It's there are enough differences around it with the amount of stone and the trees and whatnot, but just the sheer size difference to me makes it a completely different collectible. So I think in the situation like that, in a case like that, it's perfectly acceptable for the company to release a version that is different enough. You're not just making the original again.
Yeah,
you're giving the collector so much more.
Yes.
That it's not, to me, it's not the same collectible. So therefore, it's not breaking the promise of a limited edition. And then in that light, to me, that's fair game.
Yeah. And with environments, it's a little different because I mean, the environment can't change a pose, right? Like the only thing you can really change in an environment is the scale and
size,
how much of the surrounding environment you include in that collectible. And I feel like they changed enough with the environment that it warrants that it's something different. And I wouldn't be surprised if, well, what has already set this precedent with the Argonath with bag end, we now have that bigger bag end. It's different. It's got the lights in it. It's got the whole bag end with the correct scale to the other hobbit hole. So it is different compared to the limited edition and just the open edition bag end. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see a bigger Helm's Deep this year that doesn't have a hole in its wall. It'll be bigger, it'll be pre-explosion, it'll be different enough. And I'm sure the old Helm's Deep was a limited edition, but a lot of those sideshow pieces had such huge edition sizes. Sometimes they feel like an open edition because they're available quite readily on secondary. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see that this year, just because that is a trend that Weta has kind of the cat's out of the bag, right? And there are so many. There are only so many environments in MiddleEarth for Weta to bring in the collectible form, right? And some of them are really well. Helm's Deep is considered by many to be one of the best siege battles in film. And people love that castle. Like as a kid, that's what I think of when I think of a castle, is Helm's Deep, right? And so and Weta knows this, I think, and so I wouldn't be surprised if we see that.
I think that's fair. sort of, try and peer into the crystal ball and see them doing that. Like you said, there is a limited number of locations. There's some that haven't been done, so I hope to get around to those first before they start revisiting too many of the previous ones. But also that in many cases, I don't see a point in going back to some of them. For example, Rivendell, I think is perfect as is. What really could you do with it? Make it bigger? It's already pretty big as is. Some people have asked for Barad-dûr to return. And my comment to that is that, it's already pretty massive as is. So, considering the cost of collectibles these days, to take on something that big and increase the size, it's going to be, you're not going to find a lot of customers for it. But, I always think that, and then they end up selling out anyway. So what do I know? But, and I do think it was, I look at my Barad-dûr now and what they've begun to do with LEDs, especially Minas Morgul, and I regret that Barad-dûr is not a statue that came out in more recent times, because especially with the thick base that they had to give it in order to get the lava flow underneath at the right height relative to the tower, I'm like, this, it's just perfectly set up to have that lava glow with LEDs, and I think that would just make it amazing to have the that light shining up the battlements and giving it that glow. But it was made in a different time, and they weren't really toying with electronics back then. So other than that, I think it's perfect as is. I don't think that's one that I personally think they should go back to, but who knows? But as I was saying, I not every statue that has been done already as an environment, I think, would merit a revisit, because merit is the word I was looking for there. Say Weathertop, for example, or
from Monhen,
Bucklebury Ferry, the top of Amonhen. I think those are perfect as they are. They don't need to be brought back in a bigger scale. The Golden Hall is one that's been tossed around a bit, and I would love to see that come back, but in a much in a reverse, actually, of scale, make it smaller and include the rest of Edoras along with it. I think that would be, I think Weta would have a winner on their hands there.
It's interesting. You talked about Barad-dûr and a bigger, and I agree. The size of Barad-dûr is great. I'm happy with it. I like my, but yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. I wish it had a bit of LED. And those who know me on the forum know I love my LEDs. And like not having the eye, like a light up eye on Barad-dûr, it does kind of bug me a little bit. And I haven't quite solved that problem yet on how to achieve that. But being, so if Weta were to ever revisit that, the scale I think is fine, but the eye, having an LED eye and the lava would definitely be an improvement.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, I have the
and I'm too scared.
I own the Danbury Mint version of Barad-dûr, which is quite smaller, but it does have an LED underneath the plastic eye that actually changes color.
Oh, cool.
So it's really cool. But to imagine what Weta could do with that nowadays, it'd be quite incredible to see. But if they ever polled people and if there had to be a vote, I would probably turn that one down to say no, move on to other stuff. I think it's near perfect as is. It's quite big, and I see little to no room for improvement there, other than to add the lights to it. So
sell us Weta, sell us an LED eye that we can put on there to our existing Barad-dûr.
I did pick up a custom made eye from one of our forum members that does custom work, and it looks amazing. So I think that was a neat addition.
Kind of that missing element. So let's get back on track here more. Let's talk new releases. Elendil, like some of the stuff that's Weta released lately is Elendil, the Gandalf the White Classic series, and just recently today Leaflock, which I think is a really cool. All of them are great pieces. I like the pose on Elendil was just, it was the pose I wanted. And probably it's because when you Google Elendil, that pose is what shows up
That's the,
on,
yeah, that's the picture that comes up the most, is
you
that
know, that's the only
exact
picture
moment.
I took of him.
There's a
And so
couple
when I
more. There's
think,
one where he's facing off against Isildur. I
yeah,
think the
yeah,
actors were probably just joking around on set, but it's nearly identical, in
it is,
fact. So
you know.
yeah.
And so that's the pose I wanted for Elendil, because that's whenever I see him, and you know, that's how he's looking. And so I think Weta nailed, and just the detail on the armor for Elendil, it just, that's got to be one of the most beautiful sets of armor ever brought to the screen. You know, the amount of detail they put into that suit, which gets such little screen time, but it's just, it looks like it belongs in like a museum in London. And like on the clasp for his breastplate there, you know, you can see figures holding like palantirs and the rod of Numinous, you know, and it's just insane the detail they put into it. And so to finally, after, you know, and you've been waiting 20 years, I've been waiting 2 years, you know, to finally have that character released in all his glory is, I cannot wait to pair him up again with Isildur or Sauron. You know, he just looks like the face sculpt, everything about him looks perfect.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. Yeah, I mean, what can I say? It's a fantastic depiction. The preview photos of the statue look amazing. They took the time and care to correct the scabbard. They let us know that the misaligned sword was just wasn't seated properly. I mean, really, it's, yeah, other than having in hand and gushing more about it, it's just a waiting game, and it just makes me so much more excited for Gilgalad,
Right.
which you see even less. A lot of people don't get the fascination with the character, but if you know, if you're deep in the Tolkien lore and the history of Middle Earth, and you recognize more of the significance of that particular character,
Definitely.
which, to be fair, even in Tolkien's writings, there isn't an awful lot about him written. In fact, there's different versions of the story as to who his father is. It's like I feel like Gilgalad could have been on an episode of Jerry Springer.
You know, it's funny.
Turgeon, you are not the father.
When
So
I did, when I was introduced to Lord of the Rings, it was through the movies first, right? And then I started reading the books shortly afterwards. And so I didn't approach Gilgalad when from that perspective. I approached it from the film, someone who'd never read the books but only seen the films, right? And so he stuck out less to me than Elendil, who just had the coolest armor, you know. And so now, you know, obviously I have an appreciation for the character because I've read, you know, all the back lore and
I
and
mean,
so I'm excited about
his appearance in the movie is essentially an Easter egg.
Yeah, it's
When you
almost
think about
criminal
it,
how
because
brief it is.
you do see him in the moment when they reveal when they're showing the three rings, the three elven rings. So that's his other, you know, 1 second of screen time. And I've always regretted that, you know, there was quite a bit of footage shot with Mark Ferguson, who portrayed Gilgalad, for those prologue scenes. But unfortunately, just, you know, such as the world of editing and trimming things down for time, the movies are quite long as is, and it was probably decided at some point, like, why are we investing so much time on an Easter egg of a character like this that most people aren't gonna, he's not integral to the story as it develops after that. This is an event that occurred 3,000 years before the main events of the movies we are about to watch. So I completely understand why his parts were cut. But again, as a book fan and as a deep, you know, someone who has a deep appreciation for the lore and just wanting to see more of those characters, I thought it was really tragic in a way that they couldn't show a little bit more, particularly the when he does face up against Sauron, and him and Elendil do battle against Sauron, and Gil-galad is killed, because for someone who doesn't know and they're watching the movie and they see that brief second, to them that's just a random elf using a spear.
Right.
If you may know a little more, he goes, hey, I kind of noticed that guy earlier when they're holding up the rings. And then it's like, well, what happened to him? Because you just see Elendil go up, he gets bashed, and then Isildur steps in and cuts the ring off, and that's that. So you might be left wondering, like, so what happened to the Elven King?
Yeah, right.
So yeah, I really wish they actually went as far as storyboarding that scene, but I don't think it was ever filmed, and sadly, he's just kind of faded into obscurity. It's great that Sideshow Weta put out that bust long ago. But now that they are finally,
his day is
giving
coming.
the hardcore fans what they want, and they're bringing him in this full glory with Aeglos and his shield, and I think it's going to look glorious. Those three statues together.
Yeah, and then we also have like Darkseid revealing their quarter scale and 1/3 scale. If you're crazy enough to buy 1/3 scale, so it's a pretty good time to be not only a Last Alliance fan, but a Gil-galad fan, because you're gonna have more options in the next year than you've had in 20 years.
It's like he's finally getting his due.
His day has come, which is great. What did you think of the Gandalf the White? You probably have the old Sideshow Gandalf the White.
I have the original one, the one where he's on foot. I don't have the version where he's riding Shadowfax. And I think that the old version is decent. It's a good likeness. I'm not a super big fan of the pose, but it's okay.
Is the new one?
But I actually quite like the new one.
Is the new one good enough to warrant replacing your old one with?
I would say so.
Okay.
Again, it's kind of like the Sauron thing. I'm actually considering keeping both.
Oh yeah.
That'll make it about 5 Gandalfs, I think, that I'll have in my collection.
Yeah. One can never have too many Gandalfs. Too many Nazgul. You can't have enough of them. Yeah.
Even at 5, I think that's only half of the ones that are out there. And if you start including other companies, then it gets really silly. But I think the new version is it's incredibly detailed. I'm big on the likeness, and I think they did a pretty good job with this one. I think there's a very, very good chance I will be picking him up, and more than likely keeping the original as well.
Nice. For me, it's an easy decision. I don't own the old one, and obviously I want Gandalf the White in my collection. I have Gandalf the Gray. I have, I think I have 2 of them. One from the Hobbit and the old Sideshow one, and I plan on picking up the classic series Gandalf the Gray once the anniversary avalanches kind of quiet down. One thing I can appreciate on the new ones is the texture to their cloaks and the fabrics, which just isn't really present in the old ones, and so it just adds so much more detail to it. And I really like the pose on the new one. It's that moment, you can tell he's just revealed himself to the 3 hunters in Fangorn. And it is, anyone who saw that scene for the first, who didn't know that was coming, they were busy picking their jaw up. I remember as a kid, oh my gosh, Gandalf's alive. It was just an incredible moment. And so to kind of have that moment captured in a collectible is a great way to depict Gandalf the White in a very undynamic but still great pose. There's other poses I think that would be also very suitable for Gandalf the White. We were talking earlier or the other day about that really iconic poster of Gandalf for the Return of the King, and he's fighting at the Black Gates, and his hair is flying everywhere. That would make a great statue too for Gandalf the White. But I'm really happy with the one that they went with. And I think it was sculpted by Gary Hunt, and I think it looks great. I can't wait to start seeing that arrive. But the big news today was Leaf Lock, and he's a chunky boy.
Yes, he is.
Um,
He's been eating his acorns.
do you think ants eat acorns like popcorn?
That might be cannibalism.
Maybe, yeah, that might be a little weird now that I think about it.
Yeah,
that might be just sinful for an ant.
yeah.
I think he looks great. It's not a collectible I'm super interested in. I you know, I don't own the Master Collection Treebeard. Like, it's just an insane object. It's like we mentioned Grails earlier. It is so far out of my price that it's not even considered. It's not even on my radar, right? Like, what's he going for now? Like $6,000 American.
I'm fortunate enough to have one, so I haven't looked. I don't even dream of the day where I would even consider selling him. So I'm not on top of what the price is.
Yeah. Well,
to me, it doesn't
suffice to
matter. Yeah,
say,
it's
your retirement fund is
yeah.
secure.
I mean, when you talk about grail status with that particular statue, it's almost like, okay, it's one of those choose your own adventure things. So you will go down the path and you see down one corridor is the actual Holy Grail itself, and down the other one is a statue of Treebeard. Which path do you choose?
Yeah,
I bet you most of us would probably choose Treebeard.
You've chosen wisely.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
so in my, like, in my heart as a collector, I want Treebeard. That's the ant I want in my collection. That's the ant, that's Fangorn. And so, while I think Leaflock looks great, and I think it's great that Weta, for those who want an ant in their collection, I'm happy that they have the opportunity. If they don't own Treebeard, but in my, I would always be comparing them to the piece that I don't actually have. It's like I don't, and let's face it, 1,500. He's about $1,500 American. That's not cheap. That's, I don't care who you are. That is a significant amount of money to spend on a statue you don't need. Right. And so it's even more money to spend on a statue that you wish was something else. Right.
Yeah. And that's a tough pill to swallow if he's just sitting there on your shelf and that's the thought that you have every time you look at him. So is that really the collectible you want to have? You really need to disassociate the two things in your mind so that you can be at peace with spending that much money. Because I mean, especially for you and I being in Canada, after the conversion rate and adding taxes and custom fees and shipping, we're looking at, $2,400 easy Canadian to pick up something like that. So it's not a purchase you make lightly. And for a character, I mean, we talk about Elendil and Gil-galad only having a couple of seconds of screen time. Well, that's about as much time as Leaflock gets.
And I don't even know if he's mentioned in the books.
Like
I know Quick Beam is, and
Quick Beam and some others. I always remember those two. It's possible. I think when when he's listing, when he's mentioning the ends coming to the end moot. Obviously the movie's coming more to mind at the moment, but it's possible that he is actually a named character in the lore. But even so, it's like you said, I think for a lot of people, he'll just be a reminder of the statue that you wish you had and don't have. If you're looking at it from the perspective of, you want to be a completist. I had this thing for a while in my own collection where I wanted a representative of each one of the races. I had to have, obviously if you collect the main characters, you're going to get, your humans, your wizards, your elves, dwarves, hobbits. That's easy enough. But then it's like, well, I got to have an orc. I got to have an Uruk-hai, a troll,
hobbits, elves, dwarves,
Balrog, the big
Balrog.
player, yeah, things
Yeah,
like that. Actually, the one thing I wanted for the longest time and was never able to obtain was one of the eagles. So when they did,
that
I
mini
think I think there's an eagle versus fell beast diorama.
Then there's an
That's quite
eagle
old.
Gandalf like miniature where Gandalf's riding.
Yeah, well, that's the one that I was getting around to. That I eventually got. I mean, it's a very small scale, but at least I could say like, I finally have a representative of this particular, sentient species from the movie. So, long way around to saying that, yeah, if your ultimate goal is to have the race of the Ents represented in your collection, then this is a heaven sent. This is your opportunity to pick one up without having to pay $10,000 for a Treebeard that you might have missed on. So in that regard, I mean, it's great. Power to them. I'm glad Weta did it. I was a bit skeptical when it was first announced. I'm like, who exactly is this for? But I mean, you can't look at it from just your own perspective. There's a lot of different collectors out there with different priorities, different budgets, different wants and needs, and he's there to fill that gap. And he's probably going to do quite well in terms of sales.
He will. Judging by the excitement on the forum, there'll be a few collectors on there that have likely already pre-ordered them, and seem quite excited for them. And I'm quite happy for them that they can finally scratch that itch, or add that piece that's been missing from their collection. So I think I'm happy for them. It's not for me. And on one hand, I'm okay with that because that frees up other money for stuff that's coming down the road.
I mean, he's cheaper than I think than a lot of people are expected, but he's still by no means a cheap statue. So and not picking him up, it does free up funds for getting things that may be a higher priority. I mean, I'm happy not to get him because as I said, I'm fortunate enough to have Treebeard. And I often say this, more and more these days, but if money and space were no object, I would have no problems getting him. Like, you have an Ent at school, well, think about having two, or maybe imagine they release a third one down the road. I think it would look amazing to have a whole bunch of Ents in your collection.
You could do the Ents marching to war, kind of. I guess that doesn't really work. Leaf Lock is already bashing orcs.
I think I think they're already in the midst of tearing down Isengard. I think is what the theme that they're going for. So if they do release a third Ent, it's probably going to be along those lines, that he's in the middle of the action. But again, it's not for me. Not every statue has to be
before you.
For everyone. There was a time there when a lot of collectors, myself included, it's like we were just waiting on the next release, and it's like there was this, almost this urgent need to just pick up every single statue that they were putting out, because you wanted your, part of collecting things is to, have all of it, in a sense. Like, when you collect comics or hockey cards or whatnot, it's like, I'm missing that one issue, or, I need that card to complete my collection. And statues, unfortunately, can't be that way, because they take up a lot of space, they cost a lot of money. So at some point you just have to decide, like, is this everything and then some that I wanted? And a Leaf Lock's not it for me. So, but I'm glad that he's there for all the people that want him. So
and I'm thankful. Actually, as a newer collector, it didn't really, that is an easy kind of lesson, I guess, pitfall, or I don't know if you want to call it pitfall, but I haven't struggled with that as a newer collector, having to get everything that comes out. I mean, and that was mostly like, and there's some things I don't even want, like I'm happy to not have them in my collection. But most of that is just due to reality, like I think Weta released something like $28,000 American worth of collectibles last year for the Fellowship of the Ring 20th anniversary, like last year. So if you were a completionist, you spent almost $30,000 American on collectibles. That's just not feasible for
That's
most people.
that's insane. Yeah,
And
that's
so I'm glad that I don't have the urge to collect everything. I collect what I like. I don't
Mhm.
care if it's a different scale, different company, and so I'm glad that's not something I struggle with as a newer, and I think some people when they get into collecting, and I see it sometimes with newer collectors on the farm, they got to have everything. They got to,
Yeah.
and then they're often the ones saying like, whoa, what a slow down on the releases, and I'm over here like, bring on the anniversary avalanche, like I want a John and Polystone. Let's see what you got, right? Like I'm not
Yeah.
ordering it all, so I don't really
Yeah.
care if they're going to release, all this stuff because I know I'm not getting it all, and
It's
so
like that high rate of release is only a problem for the people that can't help themselves and feel like they have to pick up every single piece,
yeah,
especially now with so many other companies getting into the game.
yeah,
Like Prime One, you got Iron Studios, Dark Side.
Infinity. What else is there? Like, there's just a plethora of companies now, and it does
Oh yeah.
feel
No,
like,
people are spoiled for choice now. And
yeah,
if you don't have that degree of self-control and the wisdom to not get in over your head with your
mhm,
finances, I mean, if you're independently wealthy, you got money to burn, power to you. There's no better time to be a collector than now. But to
mhm,
those of us that do have to watch our budget, it's a fine line, and you got to scale back, and you know
mhm.
you really got to love and want that piece
Yeah,
before you plunk down that hard-earned cash for it. So
yeah. Otherwise, you
um
risk eating rice or ramen for a month. And I mean, some pieces maybe that's worth it, but
yeah, or if you're married like I am, it's the doghouse. So
yeah, I imagine at this point there is no like excuse, right? You just it's coming that like that statue's arriving that day. You're like, well, I got my bag packed. I'm ready. I don't have an excuse. So and
yeah. But for me as well, the benefit of having been this long in the game is that, I mean, I've collected such a large amount. I remember that one day where I counted all my collectibles.
mhm,
I think you were close to 100, and I'm like, oh yeah. So it took about an hour and went downstairs in my basement and counted up every little thing, and I think I was well over 320,
yeah,
330 pieces.
yeah,
So it does give me the luxury of turning down a lot of the stuff that comes out because I probably already have it in one form or another.
yeah,
Or when you've been at it that long, it really takes something special to really spark your interest and
mhm.
um, make you go for it.
And I think that
So
that should be a goal for every collector, to have what you want represented for the most part, and the ability, like, okay, I want to be at that point in my collection where I can, be really picky about what's coming in. And like I think that's a worthwhile goal to strive for in your collection um career. Like I think it's about 2 years and I'm about 100 pieces in the collection. I feel I'm doing all right. And but yeah, like yours 300, over. And I think yours is one of it's one of the good collections on the forum, but it doesn't get the attention that maybe some of the other ones get. It's a little criminally underrated, but it is probably one of the better ones on the forum, and
thanks.
and
Well, I haven't updated or bumped up the thread with new photos in a long time, so I think that's contributed to sort of falling out of most people's awareness.
hmm.
Um,
You got a lot of custom
so,
pieces and a lot of rare pieces in your collection,
yeah,
and
I've been fortunate to have made some friendships with some of our incredibly talented members across both forums
huh,
that um, take the time to craft these things and make them available to share their passion with the rest of us. And yeah, I've you know beyond that, to also be persistent enough to pursue them and say, hey, can you make me one of these? Or, you know, would you be willing to sell this? Or even in the case of some that I wasn't able to get a hold of originally, to then find someone else who is a collector that may be downsizing or wanting to sell a particular piece, to sort of keep my ear to the ground and you know, get in touch with that person and actually be able to obtain that piece. So yeah, there's a few things that have come into my collection by strange and long and torturous means, but I'm very happy to have them. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think, and some of that, you know, that just comes with getting to know, like, know the members in the community. I would say the Lord of the Rings collecting community is, it's a bit of a small community. You know, you get to know the big players and the little player. You know, it's like everybody kind of knows everybody in some ways. You know, and those relationships, you know, they take time to build. And I think, you know, being on the Flame of Udun or the Ultimate Collectors Forum, you know, really helped build those relationships. And I couldn't recommend enough joining those forums. They'll, you know, I'll probably add a link in the description for this episode for both of them, because I know my Lord of the Rings fandom really broadened once I started collecting and joining. Like when I found out I could talk to Daniel Falconer on the Flame of Udun, you know, I'd watched the appendices DVDs, you know, dozens of times growing up over the last 20 years, you know, and seeing him on my screen, right, on my TV. You know, this is the guy that designed Sting, who designed Treebeard, you know, and to be able to talk to him, ask him questions, it was just incredible. Like I didn't know this place existed. It was like Bilbo discovering Rivendell for the first, you know, that last homely house. You know, that's what it was like when I discovered the form, and then the similar kind of when I discovered Ultimate Collectors Forum, you know, and being able to talk to Kit Ray and being able to, you know, ask him questions about his really vast experience in creating the replica swords from the films, you know, and I've collected a fair amount of United Cutlery pieces now, and to be able to, it's such a privilege, like as a collector and just a fan, you know, and I think, you know, I hope I never take that for granted, that ability, you know, and that privilege.
Yep. Yeah, because I mean, they're kindly donating of their own time to connect with us as fans, to answer our questions, to give us little hints here and there when they can. And yeah, I think it's just tremendous that these guys make themselves available in that way to us. So yeah, it's really great. And as you said, I can't recommend enough that people join up and enter the discussion and put in their 2 cents on what they would like to see. I mean, whether they're lurking or actually actively posting, the people that work for these companies do have an interest in what the fans say. So you never know when they could be reading and taking notes. So,
and I mean, I hope Weta gets more involved on the forum going forward. You know, I hear from longtime collectors the you know, how they used to be more involved, and I hope that it can return to that, you know, level of engagement from Weta. And you know, there's not a whole lot you or I can do about that, other than just trying to, you know, make it a good community that where Weta feels welcome. And you know, and sometimes, you know, let's be honest, Weta has made their fair share of mistakes, especially lately, but it should always feel that, you know, like that criticism that, you know, some of us collectors might have, you know, it's a place where we can voice that, but, you know, hopefully Weta don't feel attacked, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I hope
Yeah.
when they see that kind of stuff, they don't feel like, oh, I'm not going on the flame of Doom because it's a mob up there.
Bunch of nasty people there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that sometimes, I'll admit. And it's easy sometimes because it's, like I said, it's our hard-earned money, and we have an expectation of receiving a certain level of quality in the products for the money that we're paying, and the right amount of care in the quality control and the customer service. And sometimes, unfortunately, I don't feel that it's there. And when you can't get a hold of anyone to respond to your concerns and say that you are, we understand, we hear you, and we are going to do what we can to fix that. When those lines break down, not everyone, because if it happens in enough times and for a long enough period of time, not all of us have the same level of patience or understanding. We all have our own lives to live and our own problems. And while I can be sympathetic to challenges that the company itself might be having, especially, with the world trying to right itself from the pandemic and global shipping issues and the economy tanking and all of that stuff. I think it's still important for them to not forget their customers and their fans, and I know it's not nice to jump on and see someone criticizing them, but to have a level of empathy and understanding for why it is that we are reacting that way. It's because we actually care so much about the company and we enjoy their stuff so much, and that we buy it, that when that's taken away or it's not being provided in the way that we were used to, then it becomes extremely frustrating. And unfortunately, sometimes as human nature takes hold of us, we say things that we may regret. So I do hope that they understand that it's coming from a place of us just simply wanting them to be the best that they can be, and bringing that to us, because we do greatly appreciate everything that they do. And I just want things to go back to the way that they were. And I don't feel it's quite there at the moment, but all things take work and patience and time. So,
and as a newer collector, I hear stories about how Weta used to be, and then my own experiences, whether it's shipping debacles or subpar quality control. They're frustrated, and they take some of a decent amount of the fun out of the hobby. But I know, from seeing Weta has the capability to be a top-notch, really company, right, that produces the best Lord of the Rings collectibles on the market. And it'd be, they have the artists, they have all that, the pieces there, right? It's just, it'd be nice to see them be able to put them all together where they offer a world-class product with the reliability that you, the customer, know you're going to get what you see on the website when you pre-order, with first class, customer service and communication, and affordable shipping and options. Like, I think they have all the pieces there. It's just hopefully they can put it all together.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But I think we have talked considerably. The time sure flies when you're just talking about your favorite hobbies.
For sure.
So if anyone is still listening, thank you for listening to us talk, and to
ramble on.
Or for more episodes in the future, we're hope to interview some of the notable collectors in our community and hear their stories and hear about their collections and their input and opinions on new pieces. So hope, stay tuned for that, and thank you for watching, and we hope you guys liked it.
Thank you.
All right, good night.